All right, so today we're going pretty meta. You, our philosopher friend, want to know how feminist thinkers are shaking up our understanding of philosophy's history and what it means for the field today.
I like it.
We're digging into excerpts from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on feminist history of philosophy to get to the bottom of it.
Great source.
It's a really good one.
Yeah, it's not just about adding a few women to the syllabus, is it? It's about like how an entire philosophical tradition gets built and who gets left out in the process.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's like realizing your favorite historical text is actually missing pages.
Totally.
And suddenly the whole story changes.
Absolutely.
The first thing that jumps out from these excerpts is this glaring problem of exclusion.
Yeah.
It's not that there weren't any women engaging in philosophy.
Right.
It's that their voices were systematically silenced or erased.
Think about the implications for a field like philosophy, which relies so heavily on its own lineage.
Yeah.
It's like building a cathedral on a foundation riddled with gaps.
Oh, wow.
What happens to the structure of philosophical thought if we're missing entire schools of argument?
Totally.
Different ways of approaching those big perennial questions.
And it gets even more complicated when you consider how women were portrayed, even when they were mentioned by influential philosophers.
Yeah.
Aristotle's infamous deformed male definition of women, for example.
Right.
It wasn't just a quirky opinion.
No.
It shaped centuries of thought.
Absolutely. And you start to see how deeply embedded misogyny is within the canon.
Right.
But the real challenge for feminist philosophers isn't just cataloging these instances.
Yeah.
It's untangling how this prejudice influenced the development of core philosophical concepts themselves.
So it's not just about who's holding the pen,
Right.
but the very ink they're using.
I like that.
Can you give us a concrete example
of
how a concept might be inherently gendered? I think that's a point that could easily go over the heads of those unfamiliar with feminist philosophy.
Let's take the seemingly neutral concept of reason.
Okay.
Often touted as the cornerstone of philosophy.
Right.
Historically, it's been defined in opposition to emotion.
Okay.
Which was conveniently relegated to the realm of the feminine.
Right.
This binary not only devalued women's experiences and modes of thinking, but also shaped the very questions deemed worthy of philosophical inquiry.
So you're saying that what we consider rational is itself a product of a particular historical and cultural context, one heavily influenced by gendered assumptions.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder what kinds of philosophical insights we might be missing out on by adhering to such a limited definition of reason.
Precisely.
Okay.
Feminist thinkers are questioning those limitations and exploring alternative ways of knowing and reasoning that might have been excluded from the traditional narrative.
That's where things get really exciting. It's not just critique, it's reconstruction.
Exactly.
These feminist scholars are piecing together a hidden history of philosophy.
Love it.
Excavating the works of women.
Yeah.
Who are grappling with these big questions in their own unique ways.
And it's not just about rediscovering these lost voices.
Right.
There's a push to elevate them to canonical status, to reshape the very foundation of what we consider essential philosophical reading.
It's like adding new constellations to the philosophical map.
I like that.
Suddenly you see different patterns, new connections emerge, and the whole landscape of philosophical thought starts to shift.
But this raises a complex question.
Okay.
How do you weave these previously excluded voices back into the narrative without it feeling like a forced addendum?
Right. It can't just be a philosophical footnote.
Exactly. It requires like a fundamental rethinking of how we understand philosophical connections and influences.
Okay.
One approach is to trace the threads of thought. Right.
That were specifically developed by women philosophers over time, independent of the male-dominated discourse.
So instead of just focusing on how women responded to or were influenced by male thinkers, we start to see how they were building their own distinct lines of inquiry, possibly tackling questions that were overlooked or deemed unimportant by the mainstream philosophical tradition.
Precisely.
Yeah.
This approach allows us to appreciate the unique contributions of women philosophers.
Okay.
Not as mere footnotes to the great men of philosophy, but as independent thinkers with their own valuable perspectives.
It's like discovering a hidden library.
Yes.
Filled with philosophical texts that have been gathering dust for centuries.
Love it.
And suddenly, you realize that the story of philosophy is much richer and more complex than we ever imagined.
And it challenges us to reconsider what we value in philosophical thought.
Okay.
Are we looking for universal truths?
Yeah. Or are we acknowledging the plurality of perspectives and experiences that shape our understanding of the world?
It seems like feminist history of philosophy is pushing us towards the latter.
It is.
Recognizing that there's no one right way to do philosophy. It's about expanding the boundaries of the conversation and allowing for a multiplicity of voices.
This also leads to a reassessment of how we read and interpret philosophical texts.
Right.
Instead of searching for a singular definitive meaning, feminist scholars are paying attention to the nuances, the subtext, and even the silences within a text.
It's like becoming a philosophical detective.
I like that.
Looking for clues and hidden meanings that might have been missed by previous interpretations.
And it's not just about analyzing the text in isolation.
Okay.
We need to consider the historical and cultural context, the power dynamics at play, and how those factors might have shaped the author's arguments and conclusions.
This brings up an interesting point from the Stanford Encyclopedia excerpts.
Yeah.
The concept of appropriating the canon.
Oh, yeah?
It seems paradoxical to find value in the works of philosophers known for their misogynistic views.
Right.
How are feminist scholars approaching this?
It's not about condoning or excusing those problematic views. It's about engaging with them critically and seeing if there's anything within those texts that can be salvaged, reinterpreted, or even repurposed for feminist ends.
So it's like a kind of philosophical alchemy.
I like that.
Taking something that might be seen as harmful or flawed and transmuting it into something valuable.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that require some serious mental gymnastics?
It certainly demands a nuanced approach.
Oh.
For instance, some feminist scholars are revisiting Aristotle's concept of form and matter through a gendered lens, while traditionally interpreted in a hierarchical way, with form being superior to matter, often aligned with masculine and feminine principles, respectively. They're exploring alternative readings that challenge this hierarchy.
So instead of rejecting Aristotle outright, they're trying to find ways to use his ideas to challenge traditional gender roles and hierarchies.
Exactly.
That's pretty radical.
It is.
But it also seems incredibly challenging.
It requires a careful balance of critique and creative reinterpretation. It's about recognizing the historical limitations of a text while also remaining open to the possibility that it might contain insights that can be valuable for feminist thought today.
It's like having a conversation with these philosophers across the centuries.
I love that.
Challenging their assumptions and pushing them to think in new and different ways.
And that's what makes feminist history of philosophy so dynamic and engaging. It's not just about passively absorbing information. It's about actively wrestling with ideas, reinterpreting them, and even subverting them for our own purposes.
It seems like this approach could be applied to any area of philosophy.
It can.
Not just those directly related to gender.
Absolutely.
Is that something you're seeing in your own research?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The tools and methods developed by feminist philosophers are proving to be incredibly useful for challenging traditional narratives and opening up new avenues of inquiry in a wide range of philosophical fields. For example, in ethics, feminist perspectives are prompting us to rethink our conceptions of justice, care, and responsibility. In epistemology, they're challenging us to reconsider the nature of knowledge and the role of experience in shaping our understanding of the world.
It's like feminist philosophy is providing us with a whole new set of lenses through which to view the world and grapple with those perennial philosophical questions.
And it's not just about adding women to the story. It's about fundamentally transforming the story itself. Questioning the very assumptions upon which the philosophical canon has been built, and recognizing the power dynamics that have shaped its narratives.
That brings us to a question raised in these excerpts, one that seems particularly relevant for a philosopher. What does it mean to be part of the us of philosophy?
This question cuts to the heart of who we consider to be part of the philosophical community, whose voices are valued, and whose perspectives are deemed worthy of consideration. It challenges us to confront our own biases and assumptions about what constitutes good philosophy and who gets to participate in the conversation.
It's like realizing that the philosophical table isn't as big or as inclusive as we might have thought.
Exactly.
And that there are many voices that have been excluded or marginalized. Voices that might offer valuable insights and perspectives if only we were willing to listen.
And that's one of the most important contributions of feminist history of philosophy. It's reminding us that the history of ideas is a dynamic and ongoing process, and that we all have a role to play in shaping that history, regardless of our gender, background, or philosophical orientation.
It's like saying the philosophical party is just getting started.
I like that.
And everyone's invited.
But it's a party that requires us to be more mindful of who's at the table, who's being heard, and who might be missing from the conversation.
So for a philosopher who's been trained in a more traditional approach, what would be the first step towards engaging with these feminist perspectives? Is it simply a matter of adding more women to the reading list?
It's certainly a good start, but it goes beyond simply adding names to a syllabus. It's about being willing to question those ingrained assumptions about what constitutes good philosophy. And being open to the possibility that valuable insights can come from unexpected sources.
It's like developing a new set of philosophical taste buds.
I love that.
Learning to appreciate the flavors and textures of different philosophical traditions and approaches.
And it's a journey that can be both challenging and incredibly rewarding. It's about expanding our intellectual horizons and recognizing that a more inclusive and diverse understanding of the philosophical tradition can only enrich our own inquiries and deepen our understanding of the world.
And this brings up another point that's often overlooked. It's not just about diversifying the canon. It's about diversifying the methods we use to engage with philosophical texts.
Exactly. Feminist scholars are developing new and innovative approaches to reading and interpreting philosophical texts. Approaches that take into account the historical context, the power dynamics at play, and the nuances of language and rhetoric. These methods can be incredibly valuable for anyone who wants to engage with philosophical texts in a more critical and nuanced way.
So it's not just about what we read, but how we read it. And feminist philosophy is giving us new tools and strategies for doing just that.
Exactly.
It feels like we're talking about a whole new way of approaching philosophy.
It is.
One that's more inclusive, more critical, and ultimately more vibrant.
It is a shift in perspective for sure, and it's opening up fascinating avenues of inquiry.
For a philosopher like you, it might mean revisiting those familiar texts with fresh eyes, considering new interpretations, or even exploring entirely different philosophical traditions that haven't received the same level of attention.
So it's not just about adding a few books to the reading list. It's about challenging those deeply ingrained assumptions about what constitutes philosophy in the first place.
What questions are worth asking? What methods are considered valid and whose voices get to be heard?
Precisely. And it's not just about inclusivity for its own sake. It's about recognizing that different perspectives can lead to new insights, challenge our assumptions, and ultimately help us arrive at a richer and more nuanced understanding of the world.
These excerpts also touch upon the idea that feminist history of philosophy isn't just about the past. It has direct implications for how we do philosophy today.
Absolutely.
How would you say it's shaping contemporary philosophical discourse?
One of the most significant impacts is the emphasis on situated knowledge. Feminist philosophers are reminding us that our own perspectives are shaped by our experiences, our social locations, and even our bodies. This means that there's no such thing as a purely objective or neutral viewpoint.
So instead of striving for some kind of God's eye view, it's about acknowledging our own biases and being open to the insights that can come from different perspectives.
And this has led to the development of new ethical frameworks that emphasize care, empathy, and relationality.
It's prompting us to rethink traditional conceptions of justice, autonomy, and responsibility.
It sounds like feminist philosophy is not just adding to the conversation, but fundamentally changing the terms of the debate.
That's a great way to put it.
It is.
It's challenging us to think differently about what matters, what's worth arguing about, and how we go about having those philosophical conversations.
So for our listener, the philosopher who's been grappling with these ideas, what's the key takeaway?
What's the one thing we want them to walk away with?
I think the most important message is that feminist history of philosophy is not just a specialized field of study. It's an invitation to think differently about the entire philosophical enterprise.
So it's bigger than it might seem at first glance.
It is.
It's a call to question those assumptions we often take for granted and to embrace a more inclusive and expansive vision of what philosophy can be. And who knows, maybe this deep dive will inspire our listener to embark on their own exploration of feminist thought, to discover those hidden gems of wisdom that have been waiting to be unearthed.
Indeed. It's a journey of discovery that can challenge our assumptions, expand our horizons, and ultimately enrich our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of feminist history of philosophy.
It's been great.
Thanks for joining us on this intellectual adventure.
Absolutely.
And we hope you'll join us again for more explorations in the realm of ideas.
Looking forward to it.